Hello! The legendary champion of prison battles without rules, Yuriy Boyko decides to return to the ring. The foot injury still makes itself felt, but Boyko is eager to get the title of international champion. After the victory in the ring in the prison, the Black Hills the fighter goes to the international competition. However, it turns out that the tournament was bought, and the winner is defined in advance. Nevertheless, Boyko is ready to go to the end to prove it undeniable. Place of action: a prison of a maximum regime, Black Hills, Russia. Here, among prisoners, bloody underground battles are held without rules. Gaga, the authority of the criminal world, which makes bets on trusted champions and makes a substantial profit, leads illegal fights. In the next fight, the best fighter of Gaga, Vladimir Zykov, triumphs, whose inhuman power the bandit discusses with the head of the prison, issuing money to the assistant so that he would drive him out at dinner. A clumsy thug drops them, and the Trinity nurses a prisoner overgrown with lame, rubbing the floors. Gaga mercifully invites him to leave money for himself, but in response, he hears a contemptuous refusal. The cleaner is the legendary fighter Yuriy Boyko, who was still not recovering from the heavy injury of the knee received in the long-standing last battle, and now has turned into a quiet hermit who has to spend at least another 15 long years in prison. His next petition for pardon is rejected again. In his cell, Boyko trains a weakened leg, using harvesting equipment and motivating himself with memories of former glory. A forgotten champion is visiting Gaga, for whom Boyko once earned a lot of money. The man expresses his respect to the fighter and offers the help and best conditions of stay, a new camera, and work in a prison library. However, the former champion refuses such privileges and asks for the opportunity to participate in the championships again. But Gaga believes that Boyko is not in uniform in order to get out at least against the current champion of Zaliko, not to mention international tournaments, so he is forced to refuse. The Black Hills have another fight. Vladimir Zykov arranges an opponent with a meat grinder, and his military equipment is carefully studied by a silent hermit, continuing to train an injured leg in his cell. He is obsessed with the return to the ring in the very near future, at the next championship, and decisively shall be shot up by his overgrown hair. The day of the competition comes. This time, the winner will not only receive the title of champion of a maximum regime prison Black Hills, but will also be able to fight for freedom at the first international tournament. Boyko is not going to miss this chance. Therefore, it is announced to the ring and challenges the absolute winner Vladimir Zykov, dousing him with water from a bucket. The guard is trying to take him away, but the boss Gaga, who believes that Boyko will not get out of the ring alive, makes another decision. Contrary to the expectations of the boss, Boyko turns out to be in great shape, and the unconditional champion with a pigtail flies out of the ring unconscious less than in a minute, and the audience praises a new prison champion behind bars. Boyko goes to Georgia. On the border, he is transferred under the convoy and delivered to the Gargon strict regime, following their fighters, their patrons. International criminal authorities, including Gaga, who still does not have high hopes for his applicant, gather in the luxury hotel in Georgia. The head of the Georgian prison, Vardan Kass, is building arrivals to the international tournament of prisoners. All participants behave dutifully, with the exception of the American Turbo, the upstarts, confident in his victory and that he will go straight home from the Gargon's strict regime. Meanwhile, the hotel for the gorgeous lunch of the arrivals is welcomed by the respected and influential head of the criminal Georgian syndicate, Mr. Rizzo. The next day, the head of the prison explains to the fighters that every day they will have an hour for training, but it will have a mandatory warm-up, and criminals in shackles are taken to correctional labor to a mountain quarry. The Turbo upset does not stop there, expressing the warders against the demand to wave the sledgehammer while the Colombian Raul, for some reason, rests on a deck chair. And having caught the briskly displeased look on himself, he pounces on him, but the jailers stop him. Later, opponents are found in training before the first battle, and Turbo continues the provocation. However, the cold-blooded briskly does not react to him. While arriving fighters train hard, the local champion Colombian Raul does not bother. He receives a metal box with doping from the boss, in which he later on sparring easily spreads the opponents at the corners of the ring. The qualifying round of the Survival Championship begins in the FICA. Gaga watches him skeptically, waiting for a defeat in the first duel. The fight goes on equal terms for a long time, and the tension increases, but soon the blood is smeared in the ring from the merciless strikes of a briskly. But the Frenchman continues to rise and with renewed forces goes on the attack. The advantage of Boyko soon still becomes obvious, and he finally breaks the exhausted enemy with a powerful blow to the chest. However, the ring Boyko leaves, lame on one leg. The last favorite of the championship, Raul, nicknamed Dolor, is the last to enter the battle, which means pain and a quick fighter from North Korea. Raul arranges a real performance from the battle, brutally torturing the enemy in a fun to the public until the Asian bleeding finally loses consciousness. At the end of the first round, Wanderkas comes to the defeated fighters. "I'm afraid the game is over for all of you. Forget about freedom." The prisoners are taken to the transfer by the escort, but in fact, the losers of the criminals are awaiting execution. For the survivors, the competition continues, just as working on a quarry, where Turbo shakes Boyko again. Having noticed his weak place during the battle, the American hits him in the damaged knee and provokes without ceasing to rub the rampage, which finally removes the unperturbed briskly from himself and receives a blow to the jaw. Thirsty for contractions, he is happy to attack him with fists in response. Both are punished for the fight, and the fighters are sent to the pit, a cold stench hole in which it is impossible to breathe normally. The restless Turbo in there, through the lattice of the metal door, continues to poison my attacks briskly. After the night in the pit, the bosses come to visit their fighters and find out that they, together with other prisoners, are carried to waive a picking in correctional labor, which was not provided for by persuasion. Upon learning of this, the angry Gaga and Fornati burst into the office of the head of the prison, but Wanderkas meets them with a steel, indifferent look, which shows the bandits at Mr. Rizzo, who is behind them. Rizzo explains the naive couple that everything is adjusted to the tournament. Other fighters are killed on a quarry because they must lose, because Rizzo himself put everything on the favorite of Colombian Raul. Pouring whiskey, he advises the bandits to get more money and do the same. Fighters continue to torture on a quarry. Boyko and Turbo, bound by one chain, begin to skirmish again. However, after the night in the pit, the ardor of both web, and instead of spending strength on showdowns, opponents are accepted to work harmoniously so as not to exhaust their body, while the Colombian Verzel is working on the next dopes of doping. Sewed work helps Turbo and briskly finally reconcile. Taking heavy stones, partners are discussing what their bosses already know. The tournament is adjusted, and no one except the Colombian is destined to be exit the winner. In addition, the Russian understands that here they are forced to fight not only for the victory in the ring, but also for their lives behind the walls of the Gargans. Therefore, even after exhausting work, Boyko goes to training and a talkative Turbo follows him. And Gaga and Fornati at this time collect all their money to bet on the Colombian. The head of the prison carefully watches for Boyko and Turbo and that Mr. Rizzo's winning does not break. Both are sent to work without lunch, but unbending partners are not going to give up. And under the friendly expense of Turbo and Briskly, they not only wave with a pick, but squeeze, squat, and throw stones through themselves before the eyes of perplexing overseers and prisoners. Such a load affects the long-standing injury of Russian, and the knee makes itself felt. Turbo, who noticed this, breaks and gives him mountain flowers. If you squeeze the oil out of them and spread the leg, this should relieve pain. The day of the semifinals of the tournament. In the first battle, Boyko goes against the Brazilian. The Gaga, who has already relied on the Colombian, does not show it and supports his fighter with a branded gesture. Boyko fiercely presses on the enemy, but he is overcome by pain in his leg. Colombian Raul immediately notices a weak place in the Russian, which takes place to the final, holding the Brazilian into the victorious capture. After this battle, the previously restrained Mr. Rizzo begins to worry. Believing that Turbo would be as good in battle as Boyko, he orders the head of the prison to neutralize the American before his next fight. Vander Cass passes the order to the guards and they brutally beat the prisoner. In a mutilated state, Boyko finds him in the cell, to whom Turbo reports that he will still reach the ring. Boyko comes to his senses already in a prison cell. Vander Cass and Mr. Rizzo are inclined above him. The fighter demands the opportunity to talk with Gaga, who is already here, and indifferently tells Boyko that he made a new bet on the Colombian, with whom his ward will fight in the finale.